Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Jeff, thank you for the introduction, and to all of you, thank you for the invitation to be here today, and thank you for your patience and endurance. Put up with 14 candidates for President of the United States, but the role that you all will play as we move forward both through this primary process and through the process of electing a new Republican president next November will be absolutely vital, so thank you for your willingness to be involved. This entire campaign changed a few weeks ago. Since I entered this race, I've been talking about the need that the American people have and that the world has for a strong and resolute America. When I initially started to discuss this, it may have seemed somewhat out of step with the issues that were being discussed at the time. And in the first debate in August in Cleveland, I asserted my position directly in a conversation with Senator Paul. The fact is that America today is weaker and less prepared to protect our citizens than we were 7 years ago. And I'd like to blame all of this on Barack Obama. But we have had Republicans who were complicit in this weakening as well. We've had Republicans who have stood on the stage today and said they were for a strong America, yet voted this summer in Congress to weaken America, voted to take away tools from our intelligence community that permits us to be able to connect the dots and do what President George W. Bush instructed me and the other 93 U.S. attorneys in January of 2002, to do everything we could under the law to make sure that not another American life was lost to a terrorist act on American soil. For 7 years we did that, and we used those tools directly and constitutionally, and the American people remain safe. As we stand here today, for the first time since 9/11, I think we're going to have to confront the loss of American life on American soil to terrorist conduct. Now, there's many people today who are still trying to speculate about what happened in San Bernardino yesterday. Let me tell you, as a former prosecutor, from the time I began to watch the events unfold last night, I am convinced that was a terrorist attack. And the president continues to wring his hands and say, "We'll see." But those folks dressed in tactical gear with semi-automatic weapons came there to do something. And let's remember something, everybody. If a Center for the Developmentally Disabled in San Bernardino, California, can be a target for a terrorist attack, then every place in America is a target for a terrorist attack. We need to come to grips with the idea that we are in the midst of the next World War. And you see, unlike the other folks who you'll hear from, who you have heard from today and you will hear from going forward, these acts of terrorism are not theoretical to me. They're not something that I've been briefed about by some briefers in the basement of the Capitol. They're not something that I just saw on TV. I was named United States Attorney by President George W. Bush on September 10th, 2001. And the next day, my wife did what she did most days, which was to leave her home at 6 o'clock in the morning, to get in her car, drive to the train station, take the train to the PATH station, and take the PATH train into the World Trade Center, where she went up those large escalators and walked through the lobby of the World Trade Center at 7:30 that morning. That morning, I took our children to school. And when I got home, I turned on the television set, and the first building was on fire. And I immediately called Mary Pat at work. Her office was 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. So I asked her what was going on. She said, well, they've told us just a commuter plane that flew into the building. We're fine, we're working. Don't worry about it. I'm at my desk, I'm working. While we continued to talk about our day, the second plane hit the second building. And she said to me, they're telling us we have to evacuate to the basement. I'll call you as soon as I can. On that day, Mary Pat and I had 3 children, 8, 5, and 1. And as the next 5.5 hours passed, when I desperately tried to get back in touch with her and could not, there were 3 things that went through my head. 1, what will I do if I've lost my best friend? 2, what am I going to tell our children? And 3, am I really ready to be a single parent? Am I ready to raise these children on my own? In the intervening hours, the school called and told us that because so many children in our school had parents who worked in Lower Manhattan, that they had told the children about the attack, and that we needed to be ready to speak to our kids when we picked them up from school. And when I was 10 minutes away from leaving to pick the children up from school, I got the single greatest phone call that I've ever gotten in my life. It was my wife on the other end of the phone from a payphone in Midtown Manhattan, where she had walked with wet T-shirts wrapped around her face and the face of her colleagues to get through the dust and the contaminants that were covering Lower Manhattan, and she told me she was okay. That night she came home, and one of our neighbors, who she had helped to get a job in her industry after he had lost his wife called us. And she said, did you see Frank? Did you see him anywhere downtown when you were leaving? Because he hasn't come home and I haven't heard from him. Mary Pat had helped him get a job at a place called Eurobrokers, which was on the 44th floor of the Second World Trade Center tower. Frank never came home. And the gym in our parish, in our hometown, is now named in his honor. We sat at his funeral with his widow. Later that night, our oldest son's best friend, his mom called. Her husband worked for Cantor Fitzgerald. None of them who were there that day at work came home alive. That young man was 8 years old at the time that his father died. And since Facebook has come into the popular being, every year on his father's birthday, he puts a picture of his father on his Facebook page with just one simple sentence. It says, "Dad, we'll never forget you." We went to that funeral too. You see, what I'm worried about now is, as a nation, we're forgetting his father. As a nation, we're forgetting Frank. As a nation, we have become complacent and soft and unwilling to do the difficult things that need to be done, to do the first thing that any president of the United States must do when he takes his hand off that Bible on January 20th of 2017, and that is to protect the lives and the security of the American people, and that is exactly what I'll do when I take my hand off that Bible. And unlike others, on that first day, on January 21st, when the director of the FBI, Jim Comey, walks into the Oval Office to give me my national security briefing, we won't have to introduce ourselves to each other. When I was the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, Jim Comey was the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan. And we worked together, jointly, on preventing terrorist attacks in America. And then he became my boss as the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. So when Jim sits there, he won't have to introduce himself. And when he sits there, he won't have to wonder whether I understand all the acronyms he's going to be using in his briefing. When we sit there together, he won't have to wonder whether I know what he means by actionable intelligence. When we're sitting there and he's briefing me, he will never wonder whether I have his back to do everything that needs to be done to prevent another attack, because I've done it with him before and I will do it again as President of the United States. And while this is important, vital, absolutely vital for the future safety and security of the American people, I'd suggest to you it's vital for the security and stability of the rest of the world as well. Because if you don't have a strong, resolute American president who says that terror anywhere is unacceptable, then our allies around the world can't count on us either. When I went to Israel in April of 2012 as governor of New Jersey, it was very soon after the death of Mrs. Netanyahu's father. And we turned out to be the first people that they received at their home for dinner after they had gone through their period of mourning. And when I sat with the Prime Minister that night, he obviously had grave concerns about what was going on in the Middle East and how it was going to affect the people that he's sworn to protect. When we were leaving after a 3-hour dinner that night, talking about not only the world, but about our children and their future, he thanked me for coming as he was leaving to go back to work. And as I walked out, I looked at him and I said, "Mr. Prime Minister, I'll tell you one thing. If I ever do get the chance to become President of the United States, Israel will never have a better friend than me, because I understand that America has no better friend in the Middle East or anywhere around the world than Israel." And that partnership has to be renewed. That partnership has to be restored. And it can only be renewed and restored through American strength of purpose. The Israeli government and the Israeli people need to know that when an American president says he's going to do something, he will do it, regardless of where the polls are in any particular day. They need to understand that there is not a moral equivalency with the conflict in the Middle East. And they need to know that if Israel is threatened, that there will not be daylight between the United States and Israel, and that the United States will stand up for Israel in the very same way that Israel has stood up for the United States during its time of existence as well. Now, it's only achieved if we are willing to rebuild our military. It's only achieved if we're willing to rebuild our intelligence community. It is only achieved if we are willing to support our law enforcement community. The stability of the world will not be achieved in any other way, everybody. That's the only way it will be achieved. And anyone who tells you any differently is absolutely playing with fire. I don't need to be taught these things. The last 13 years of my life have been about protecting the people of the state of New Jersey, and as a United States Attorney, contributing to the protection of the people of our country in one of the most dangerous times our country has ever seen. Those times are now being repeated. And so let's be clear as we conclude, and then I'll take your questions. The ISIS is not the JV, everybody. ISIS is a real, everyday threat to the lives and the security of the American people and people who love freedom all around the world. As President of the United States, not only my goal, but my accomplishment will be to make sure that ISIS is destroyed as both an ideology and a force around the world, and we'll unite the world together to do it. And lastly, the American people and the people around the world will know for certain that they have a president of the United States who says what he means and means what he says, and that there will be no ambiguity, no hand-wringing in the Oval Office, no inability to make decisions, but an absolute willingness and commitment to stand up for what is right and what we believe in. And that means standing by our friends, fighting for them when necessary, and remembering that first and foremost, the safety and security of our children and our grandchildren is what the American government must do above anything else. And so I look forward to the opportunity to put together the team that will protect America once again and that will make the American people feel comfortable when they go to bed at night, that they have a president who will put their country first and their safety and security above all else. I know that while the issues of the economy and education and technology are issues of concern to all of you, that you understand that if we don't have safety and security first, none of those other issues matter. I just want you to remember the week after September 11th, when airlines weren't flying, when sports weren't being played by professionals or by children, when the stock market was closed, and when we all jerked our necks up to the sky every time a plane started to go overhead when those airplanes started to fly again. America cannot work unless America feels safe and secure. And when I'm President of the United States, they will feel safe and secure every night that they go to bed, knowing that they have a strong, resolute leader making the decisions that put America's interests first and the interests of our friends first. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it very much.